The big alien ship came out of space near Earth's moon. It was smooth and silver with shiny curves that bent light around them. The ship was 3 times bigger than the largest human space station. Captain Maria Santos watched from the human defense platform with worry. "Captain, we have a message coming in," said Lieutenant Johnson. His fingers moved fast on the computer. "It's coming through all our radio channels at once." "Put it on the main screen," Santos said. The screen showed a tall, thin creature with pale blue skin and 4 arms. Its head was long with big black eyes that seemed to look right through everything. When it talked, its voice was cold and robotic. The alien computer changed its words into English. "I am Ambassador Krell from the Zephyrian Galactic Empire. We have watched your people spread beyond your home planet. Our law says all species in this part of space must pay us for protection." Santos felt her teeth clench together. She had heard stories about this empire from the few alien traders who sometimes visited human space. They controlled thousands of star systems and made weaker species pay them money to avoid being destroyed. "You must give us 2 million tons of metal every Earth year, plus 10% of all power from your colonies," Krell continued. "This payment means the Empire will protect you from pirates, hostile aliens, and other dangers." The alien stopped talking and stared at Santos through the screen. "You have 30 of your days to agree. If you refuse, we will take action against you." The screen went dark. Santos stood quietly for a moment, thinking about what she had just heard. Around her, the bridge workers waited nervously. "Get me Admiral Chen," she said. "High priority message." Soon, Admiral Sarah Chen's face appeared on the screen. She was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and gray hair pulled back tight. Chen had been getting humanity ready for this day ever since the first reports about the Zephyrian Empire reached Earth 5 years ago. "I saw the message, Captain," Chen said before Santos could speak. "The alien ship is being watched by every telescope we have. How many crew do you think are on it?" "Based on the ship size and what we know about their technology, maybe around 500, Santos replied. "Admiral, what should we do?" Chen was quiet for a long moment. Her face showed how heavy this decision was. "Send them a reply. Tell them we appreciate their offer, but humanity says no to their protection." Santos felt her heart jump. "Ma'am, are you sure? The reports say they have destroyed whole planets for refusing to pay." "I'm sure, Captain. We've been getting ready for this moment for years. It's time to see if we prepared enough." 2 hours later, Santos was facing the alien ambassador again on screen. This time, Krell looked even colder than before. "Ambassador Krell," Santos began, reading from her prepared words. "Humanity thanks the Zephyrian Empire for their offer of protection. However, we must say no. We want to handle our own security." Krell's forearms moved in what might have been surprise. "You refuse? Do you know what happens to species that refuse imperial protection?" "We know about your reputation," Santos replied calmly. "Our answer stays the same." The alien leaned forward with narrowed black eyes. "Your species is young and foolish. You control only a few star systems. Your technology is primitive compared to ours. Your military has only small patrol ships and defense platforms. Do you really think you can fight the Empire?" Santos felt a cold smile cross her face. The aliens clearly knew very little about what humans had really built. "Good. Let them think humans were weak and not ready. We understand the risks," she said. "Our answer is final." Krell stared at her for several seconds. "Very well. You have chosen poorly. The Empire will remember this insult. You have 30 days to change your mind, after which we will take action." The message ended. Santos fell back in her chair, realizing she had been holding her breath. Around her, the bridge crew began talking in worried whispers. "Captain," Lieutenant Johnson said quietly, "did we just start a war with the Galactic Empire?" Before Santos could answer, her computer made a sound with an incoming priority message from Admiral Chen. The Admiral's face appeared on screen, but this time she was not alone. Behind her, Santos could see other high-ranking military officers and government officials. "Captain Santos," Chen said, "please come to Earth immediately for an emergency meeting of the Colonial Defense Council. We have a lot of work to do." Over the next few days, news of humanity's refusal spread throughout human space. On every colony, world, and space station, people gathered around news screens to hear the details. Some were afraid, others were angry. Many wondered if their leaders had made the right choice. In the secret military facilities hidden throughout the solar system, however, a different kind of preparation was happening. For 5 years, ever since first contact with alien traders had told them about the Zephyrian Empire, humanity had been quietly building up their defenses. Deep in the asteroid belt, robot shipyards had been working day and night to build new warships. On the dark side of the moon, weapons labs had been developing new technologies. In hidden bases on Mars and the outer planets, soldiers had been training for a war they hoped would never come. Admiral Chen stood in the main briefing room of the secret command center buried beneath the Rocky Mountains. Around her, dozens of officers and officials listened as she explained humanity's situation. The Zephyrian Empire controls over 10,000 star systems, she began. Their military is huge and experienced. They have been conquering weaker species for over 1,000 years. By every logical calculation, we should be afraid. She paused and looked around the room. But humans have never been good at following logical calculations. We didn't logically decide to leave Earth and spread across the stars. We didn't logically choose to face the unknown dangers of space. And we won't logically bow down to alien bullies now. A murmur of agreement went through the room. Chen continued. The Empire thinks we are weak because we are young. They think our technology is primitive because we haven't conquered other species. They think our military is small because they can only see our patrol ships and defense platforms. Her voice grew stronger. They have no idea what humans can do when we're fighting for our freedom. They don't know about our hidden shipyards. They don't know about our new weapons. They don't know about the alliance treaties we've been secretly making with other species who hate the Empire just as much as we. 2. The Admiral turned on a holographic display, showing the current positions of human military assets throughout known space. The display showed the truth that no alien spy had discovered yet. Humanity had been very busy over the past 5 years. We have 30 days before they come, Chen concluded. Let's make sure those 30 days count. As the meeting ended and officers hurried to their jobs, nobody noticed the small communication device hidden in the air system. The device had been recording everything, and its signal was already racing toward the edge of human space, carrying news that would very soon reach alien ears. The countdown to war had begun, and both sides were about to discover things about each other that would change the galaxy forever. Admiral Thex of the Zephyrian Imperial Navy stood on the bridge of his ship, the Dominion's Pride, watching the final preparations for what he thought would be a very short military operation. His pale blue skin shined under the ship's lights as his forearms moved across the control panels with practiced skill. Status report, he ordered in the clicking, whistling language of his people. All 12 ships are ready for hyperspace jump, replied his second-in-command, Commander Vex. Weapons are charged, shields are at maximum, and our files on human military capabilities have been updated. Thex allowed himself what might have been a smile, though on his alien face it looked more like a sneer. The intelligence reports made for amusing reading. Humanity controlled only 7 star systems. Their space fleet had maybe 50 small ships, mostly patrol vessels and cargo ships converted for military use. Their weapons technology was at least 2 centuries behind Imperial standards. Have the humans tried to contact us since our 30-day deadline ended? Thex asked. No, sir. Our monitoring stations report no unusual activity in human space. Their patrol schedules remain normal. Their communication traffic shows no signs of military preparation. They appear to be ignoring our ultimatum completely. This was exactly what Thex had expected. Young species often went through a phase of stubborn pride when they first met the Empire. They would refuse the initial demand, force the Empire to make a military demonstration, and then quickly surrender once they realized how outmatched they were. It was a pattern he had seen dozens of times before. Excellent. Begin the hyperspace jump to the human border world of New Geneva. We'll start there and work our way toward their home system until they come to their senses. The space around the 12 Imperial ships began to shimmer and bend as their hyperspace engines turned on. Within moments, they vanished from normal space, traveling faster than light toward human territory. 3 days later, the Imperial fleet came out of hyperspace at the edge of the New Geneva system. Thex studied the tactical display with professional interest. New Geneva was a typical human colony world, a small planet with about 2 million people, surrounded by mining stations and orbital facilities. According to their intelligence, it was defended by no more than 6 human patrol ships. Sir, we're detecting human ships approaching our position, reported the sensor officer. 20 ships moving in formation. Thex's eyes widened slightly. 20 ships was more than their intelligence suggested, but still nothing to worry about. Show me their ship types. The main screen showed the approaching human fleet. The ships were ugly, boxy things that looked like flying metal rectangles. They had none of the smooth curves of Imperial ships, instead appearing to be built purely for function rather than beauty. Their hulls were dark gray and covered with strange angular bumps that might have been weapon mounts or sensor arrays. Primitive design, commented Commander Vex. Their ships looked like they were built by engineers, with no sense of artistic beauty. Function. Overform is typical of younger species, Thex replied. They haven't learned to appreciate the finer aspects of spacecraft design. Still, 20 ships means we should take this seriously. Signal all vessels to battle stations. The human fleet was now close enough for detailed scans. Thex frowned as he read the sensor reports. The human ships were larger than expected, each one roughly the size of an Imperial light cruiser. Their armor appeared to be unusually thick, and the strange bumps on their hulls were definitely weapons of some kind. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet, the communication officer announced. Put it on screen. The display showed the bridge of one of the human ships. The captain was a middle-aged woman with dark skin and graying hair. Her uniform was simple and practical, lacking the fancy decorations that Imperial officers wore to show their rank and achievements. This is Captain Rodriguez of the colonial defense ship Defiance, she said in accented English. The ship's translation system converted her words into proper Imperial language. You are entering human territory without permission. State your business or leave immediately. Thex was amused by the human's bold tone. I am Admiral Thex of the Zephyrian Imperial Navy. Your species was given 30 days to accept Imperial protection. That time is ended. Surrender immediately and we will be merciful. Captain Rodriguez's expression didn't change. I'm afraid that's not going to happen, Admiral. This is your final warning. Leave human space now. Or what? Thex asked with genuine curiosity. You'll attack us with your primitive ships? If necessary, yes. Thex ended the transmission and turned to his weapons officer. Lock targets on all human ships. Prepare to disable their engines. We want prisoners for questioning. Sir, we're receiving multiple distress signals from the human ships, the communication officer reported. They appear to be calling for help. Perfect, Thex thought. The humans were already panicking. Their distress calls would only be heard by more patrol ships, which wouldn't arrive in time to make any difference. This demonstration of Imperial power would be over within the hour. Fire warning shots across their bows, Thex ordered. Let's see how brave they are when our plasma cannons start shooting. The Dominion's Pride's main guns fired, sending brilliant streams of superheated plasma past the human formation. The shots were deliberately aimed to miss, but they carried enough energy to vaporize a small asteroid. It was an impressive display of Imperial firepower. The human ship's response was unexpected. Instead of retreating or surrendering, they began to spread out into a wider formation. Their weapon systems, whatever they were, began powering up. Energy readings spiked across Thex's sensor displays. Sir, the sensor officer said with growing alarm, the human ships are not what they appeared to be. I'm reading massive internal structures, weapon systems I don't recognize, and energy signatures that suggest they're much more heavily armed than our intelligence indicated. Before Thex could respond to this disturbing news, space around his fleet began to shimmer with the distinctive energy patterns of ships dropping out of hyperspace. But these weren't more human patrol ships arriving to help their friends. These were warships. Lots of warships. Within 30 seconds, over 100 human ships had appeared around Thex's fleet. They came from all directions, above, below, and from the sides. Each one was larger and more heavily armed than the 20 ships that had first approached the Imperial force. Thex stared at his tactical display in growing horror. The human fleet wasn't just defending a border world with a few patrol ships. They had somehow assembled a massive military force and hidden it from Imperial intelligence. Worse, they had used his own attack as a trap, drawing his ships into a position where they were completely surrounded. How is this possible? Commander Vex whispered. Our intelligence said they had no more than 50 ships total. Our intelligence was wrong, Vex replied grimly. He looked at the tactical display again, counting the human ships surrounding his fleet. There were at least 120 of them, and more were still arriving. The original 20 human ships that had seemed to be calling for help were now moving into attack formation alongside the newcomers. Thex realized that their distress signals hadn't been panic at all. They had been coordinated tactical communications, calling in reinforcements that had been waiting in hyperspace just outside the system. "Sir, we're receiving another transmission from the humans," the communication officer announced. Captain Rodriguez appeared on screen again, but now her expression was very different. Instead of the diplomatic politeness she had shown before, her face was hard and determined. "Admiral Thex," she said, "you came here expecting to find a few frightened colonists with outdated ships. Instead, you found the Colonial Defense Fleet. We've been preparing for this day for 5 years. Every ship you see around you was built specifically to fight the Zephyrian Empire." Thex felt something he hadn't experienced in decades of military service. Fear. Not just concern or caution, but real, genuine fear. His 12 ships were some of the finest vessels in the Imperial Navy, but they were outnumbered 10 to 1 by enemies who had clearly been planning this confrontation for years. "You have 2 options," Rodriguez continued. "Surrender now and your crews will be treated according to the laws of war. Or try to fight your way out and discover what human weapons can do to Imperial ships." Thex looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They were all staring at the tactical display, watching as the human ships moved into perfect attack positions. Every escape route was blocked. Every angle was covered. His small fleet was trapped in a box made of human warships, and the walls were closing in. For the first time in his military career, Admiral Thex was forced to consider the possibility that the Zephyrian Empire might have made a serious mistake. Admiral Thex stared at the tactical display for another 10 seconds before making his decision. 12 Imperial ships against over 100 human ships was not a battle, it was suicide. But surrender was not an option for an Imperial officer. The shame of returning to Zephyrian space in defeat would be worse than death. "All ships prepare for combat," he ordered. "Target their command ships and fire at will." The Imperial fleet opened fire at the same time, their plasma cannons sending streams of superheated energy toward the human ships. The shots were precise and powerful, each one carrying enough force to punch through standard military shields and melt through most known armor types. The humans didn't even try to dodge. This surprised Thex until he saw what happened next. The plasma bolts struck the human ships and simply splashed across their hulls like water hitting a rock. Where the energy should have burned through armor plating, there were only scorch marks. Where there should have been explosions and hull breaches, the human ships continued moving as if nothing had happened. "What kind of armor are they using?" Commander Vex asked in shock. "I don't know," Thex replied, "but keep firing. Nothing is completely invulnerable." The Imperial ships continued their attack, pouring plasma fire into the human fleet. Some shots seemed to have more effect than others, creating brighter flashes and deeper scorch marks, but not one human ship was seriously damaged. It was like attacking a mountain with a pocket knife. Then the humans fired back. The first thing Thex noticed was that human weapons made no light show at all. There were no bright energy beams, no glowing plasma bolts, no impressive displays of destructive power. Instead, there was just a series of small flashes from the human weapon mounts, followed by impacts on Imperial ships that shook the entire fleet. "Damage reports," Thex shouted as his flagship rocked under multiple impacts. "Hull breach on deck 7, came the reply. "Shield generators offline. Forward plasma cannon destroyed." More impacts followed in rapid succession. Whatever the humans were shooting, it was punching through Imperial shields and armor like they weren't even there. Thex looked at his sensor readings and felt his blood run cold. The human weapons weren't using energy at all. They were firing solid projectiles at incredible speeds. "Kinetic weapons," he whispered in recognition. "They're using kinetic weapons." It was a primitive concept that most advanced species had abandoned centuries ago. Energy weapons were cleaner, more efficient, and easier to power. But kinetic weapons, solid projectiles accelerated to high speeds, had one major advantage. They carried enormous amounts of kinetic energy, and kinetic energy was very hard to defend against with conventional shields. The problem was that kinetic weapons required massive amounts of power to accelerate projectiles to useful speeds, and the targeting systems needed to be incredibly precise at space combat distances. Most species found it easier to just use plasma cannons or particle beams. Apparently, humans had decided to do things the hard way. "Sir, the Conquest's blade is reporting critical damage," the communication officer announced. They're requesting permission to withdraw. Thex looked at the tactical display. One of his cruisers was drifting out of formation, atmosphere streaming from dozens of hull breaches. Around it, human ships continued their methodical bombardment, their kinetic projectiles striking with mechanical precision. Permission denied, Thex said. All ships maintain formation and continue firing. But even as he gave the order, he knew it was hopeless. His ships were designed to fight other energy weapon-equipped vessels. Their shields and armor were optimized to deflect or absorb plasma fire and particle beams. Against solid projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed, his defenses were almost useless. The human ships, on the other hand, seemed to be built specifically for this kind of combat. Their thick, angular armor was designed to deflect kinetic impacts. Their shields, while weaker than Imperial systems against energy weapons, were apparently very good at slowing down incoming projectiles. And their weapons were clearly built to punch through conventional military defenses. "Sir, we need to retreat," Commander Vex said urgently. "We're being torn apart. Retreat to where?" Vex snapped. "They have us surrounded." As if to emphasize his point, another Imperial ship, the Star Destroyer Vengeance, exploded in a brilliant fireball as human kinetic rounds found its reactor core. Pieces of the ship scattered in all directions, some of them impacting nearby Imperial vessels and causing additional damage. Thex made a desperate decision. "All ships, maximum power to engines. We'll try to break through their formation and reach hyperspace distance." The remaining Imperial ships turned toward what appeared to be the thinnest part of the human encirclement and accelerated. For a moment it seemed like the plan might work. The human ships were slower and less maneuverable than Imperial vessels, and there was a gap in their formation that might be wide enough to squeeze through. Then the humans did something that changed everything. Instead of trying to close the gap or pursue the fleeing Imperial ships, the human ships simply adjusted their firing patterns. The kinetic projectiles that had been arriving in steady streams suddenly became a coordinated barrage. Hundreds of solid rounds converged on the space that the Imperial ships would have to pass through to escape. It was like flying into a wall of metal moving at speeds close to light. The Imperial cruiser Eternal Glory was the first to reach the barrage. The ship simply disintegrated as dozens of kinetic projectiles tore through it from multiple angles. There wasn't even an explosion. The vessel just came apart like a toy hit by a hammer. Two more Imperial ships suffered similar fates before Thex realized what was happening. The humans weren't just firing randomly, they were calculating flight paths, predicting where his ships would be, and timing their shots to create an impenetrable barrier of kinetic death. "All ships, emergency stop," he ordered. "Abort the breakout attempt." The surviving Imperial vessels reversed thrust and came to a relative stop, but it was too late. Of his original 12 ships, only 6 were still combat capable. The others were either destroyed or drifting helplessly with critical damage. Thex slumped in his command chair, finally accepting the reality of his situation. His fleet was trapped, outnumbered, and outgunned by enemies who had clearly studied Imperial tactics and designed their entire military strategy around defeating them. "Sir, we're receiving another transmission from the human commander," the communication officer reported. Captain Rodriguez appeared on screen again. Behind her, Thex could see the bridge of her ship, a utilitarian workspace filled with screens, control panels, and crew members focused on their duties. It looked nothing like the elegant, artistic bridges of Imperial vessels, but it radiated an air of competent professionalism that was somehow more intimidating than any amount of decoration. "Admiral Thex," she said calmly, "you've had a chance to see what human weapons can do. Are you ready to discuss surrender terms?" Thex felt the weight of centuries of Imperial military tradition pressing down on him. No Zephyrian admiral had ever surrendered to a primitive species. The shame would follow his name throughout history. But looking at his tactical display, he also realized that continuing to fight would accomplish nothing except the deaths of his remaining crew members. The humans had demonstrated their ability to destroy his ships at will. They were simply choosing to offer him a chance to surrender, rather than completing the massacre. "What terms do you offer?" he asked finally. "Standard prisoner of war treatment according to galactic law," Rodriguez replied. "Your crews will be held until the end of hostilities, but they will be treated humanely. Officers will be allowed to keep their personal effects and will be housed according to their rank." It was a generous offer, far more merciful than what the Empire typically offered to defeated enemies. But Thex knew that accepting it would mean the end of his career and possibly his life when he eventually returned to Zephyrian space. "I need time to consider your offer," he said. "You have 1 hour," Rodriguez replied. "After that, we resume combat operations." The transmission ended, leaving Thex alone with his thoughts and the harsh reality of his situation. Around him, his bridge crew waited silently for orders that he wasn't sure he could give. In the space surrounding his battered fleet, over 100 human warships maintained their positions with mechanical precision. Their ugly functional designs no longer seemed primitive to Thex. Instead, they looked like exactly what they were: weapons of war built by a species that had studied their enemies carefully and prepared for this moment with deadly efficiency. For the first time in over 1,000 years of galactic expansion, the Zephyrian Empire had encountered an enemy that was ready for them, and that enemy had just announced to the galaxy that the age of Imperial domination might be coming to an end. Grand Admiral Zex Thul stood in the war room of the Imperial fortress world of Kethmore, staring at the holographic display that showed the complete destruction of Admiral Thex's expedition. Of the 12 ships that had been sent to punish the humans, only 3 had managed to escape. The rest had been destroyed or captured by what Imperial intelligence had dismissed as a primitive species with outdated technology. "Explain to me," Zex Thul said in a voice that made his subordinates flinch, "how an entire Imperial squadron was defeated by primitive humans using metal projectiles." Intelligence Director Kenthar shifted nervously, his forearms fidgeting with the data pad that contained the battle reports. "Grand Admiral, it appears our information about human military capabilities was significantly wrong. The humans have been conducting a massive military buildup in secret, while maintaining the appearance of a weak, divided species. Continue. Based on testimonies from the surviving ships, the humans have developed kinetic weapons that can penetrate our standard shields and armor. Their ships are built specifically for this type of combat, with thick armor plating designed to deflect energy weapons, while their own weapons are optimized for piercing conventional defenses." Zex Thul turned away from the holographic display to face his staff. He was old, even by Zephyrian standards, with pale blue skin that had faded almost to white and scars from a dozen military campaigns across his arms and face. He had served the Empire for over 2 centuries, and had never seen an Imperial fleet defeated by a species they were trying to conquer. "How many ships do they have?" he asked. "Unknown, sir. Our estimates were clearly wrong. The force that destroyed Thex's squadron numbered over 100 vessels, and intelligence suggests that was only their border defense fleet. We have no reliable information about the size of their main battle fleet." This was worse than Zex Thul had expected. The Empire's expansion strategy depended on the threat of overwhelming force. When that threat failed, as it had with the humans, the only option was to actually use overwhelming force. But doing so required knowing what kind of force would be overwhelming. "What do we know about their technology level?" he asked. Science Director Velketh stepped forward with his own data pad. "Their faster-than-light technology appears to be roughly equal to ours, though they may have made improvements we're not aware of. Their energy shields are weaker than Imperial standard, but they seem to have compensated with much thicker physical armor. Their weapons technology is actually quite sophisticated. The kinetic projectiles they use require very precise manufacturing and extremely advanced targeting computers. And their strategic capabilities." Intelligence Director Kenthar consulted his notes. "This is perhaps the most concerning aspect, sir. The humans didn't just build a fleet in secret. They coordinated the entire operation perfectly. They knew exactly when and where our forces would attack. They had prepared positions and reinforcements ready, and they executed a complex tactical plan with precise timing. This suggests a level of military planning and coordination that we seriously underestimated." Zex Thul walked over to the tactical display and began entering commands. A new hologram appeared, showing the current positions of Imperial forces throughout the galaxy. Red dots marked the locations of major battle fleets, while blue areas showed sectors under Imperial control. "The nearest major fleet is Battle Group 7 under Admiral Kreshtal," he said, highlighting a cluster of red dots. 200 ships, including 30 heavy cruisers and 5 dreadnoughts. They can reach human space within 10 standard days. "Sir," Kenthar said carefully, "do you think 200 ships will be sufficient?" The humans clearly have more vessels than we initially believed, and their weapons seem to be very effective against our defenses. 200 Imperial ships against even 500 human vessels should be more than adequate, Zexthul replied. The humans won one battle using surprise and preparation. They won't have those advantages again. But even as he said it, Zexthul felt a nagging doubt. The battle reports from Admiral Thex's survivors painted a picture of human forces that were not just numerous, but also well-trained, well-equipped, and tactically sophisticated. This was not a species that had simply gotten lucky in one engagement. Grand Admiral, Science Director Velketh said hesitantly, "There's something else you should know. Our analysis of the human weapon systems suggests they've been developing this technology for several years. This wasn't a hasty preparation. It was a long-term military program specifically designed to counter Imperial forces." "What do you mean?" "Sir, kinetic weapons are extremely difficult to develop to military effectiveness. The power requirements, the targeting systems, the manufacturing precision needed for the projectiles. All of this requires years of research and development. The humans didn't just build a fleet, they invented an entirely new approach to space combat." Zexthul absorbed this information in silence. If the humans had spent years developing anti-Imperial weapons, they had been planning for this conflict long before the Empire had even noticed their existence. That suggested a level of strategic thinking that was rare among younger species. "There's more, sir," Intelligence Director Kenthar added. "We've been monitoring communications from other species in that sector of the galaxy. Several of them have been in contact with the humans, and there are indications that some kind of alliance may be forming." This was the worst possible news. The Empire's strategy of controlling through intimidation only worked when potential rebels were isolated and facing Imperial forces alone. If the humans were building alliances with other species, they could potentially inspire widespread rebellion. "Which species?" Zexthul demanded. "The Altarians, definitely. They've been secretly trading with humans for over a year. The Vegan Collective has had diplomatic contact, though we're not sure about any formal agreements, and there are unconfirmed reports of human ships being seen in Draconian space." Zexthul felt a chill run down his spine. The Draconians were a warrior species that the Empire had conquered 50 years ago. They had never fully accepted Imperial rule and had been looking for any excuse to rebel. If the humans could provide them with weapons and support, the results could be catastrophic. "Send word to Admiral Kreshetal," he ordered. "Battle Group 7 is to proceed to human space immediately. Maximum speed, full combat readiness. I want those ships there in 8 days, not 10. "Yes, sir," Kenthar replied. "What are the Admiral's orders regarding the human colonies?" Zexthul thought for a moment. The standard Imperial response to rebellion was overwhelming force applied without mercy. Entire planets had been bombarded into submission when their inhabitants refused to accept Imperial rule. But the humans had already proven they wouldn't be intimidated by threats, and their military capabilities were apparently much greater than anyone had realized. "Tell Kreshetal that his primary objective is to destroy the human military fleet," he said finally. "Once their ships are eliminated, we can deal with their colonies at our leisure. But the fleet must be destroyed first, completely and permanently." As his subordinates hurried to carry out his orders, Zexthul remained in the war room, studying the tactical displays and trying to understand how the Empire had so completely misjudged the human threat. In over 1,000 years of expansion, the Zephyrian Empire had never encountered a species that had prepared for them so thoroughly. The humans had spent years studying Imperial tactics, developing counter-strategies, building alliances, and preparing for a war that everyone else had thought was impossible. They had done all of this while maintaining the appearance of a weak, scattered species that posed no threat to anyone. It was, Zexthul had to admit, a remarkably sophisticated deception. The question now was whether Admiral Kreshetal's battle group would be sufficient to overcome whatever other surprises the humans had prepared, because Zexthul was becoming increasingly certain that the humans had more surprises waiting. In the depths of space, 8 days' travel from the human frontier, Admiral Kreshetal received his orders and began preparing 200 of the Empire's finest warships for what he expected to be a routine military operation. He had no way of knowing that the humans had been tracking Imperial fleet movements for months, or that they were already making their own preparations for the battle to come. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine whether the Zephyrian Empire would continue its thousand-year reign of galactic dominance, or whether a young species called humanity would prove that even the mightiest empires could fall. Meanwhile, in hidden bases throughout human space, Admiral Chen was implementing the final phase of humanity's preparation. The victory at New Geneva had been just the beginning. Now it was time to show the Empire what humans could really do when they were fighting for their survival. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the human command ship Indomitable, watching the final preparations for humanity's last stand. Through the thick windows, she could see hundreds of human warships taking their positions around Earth, while automated defense platforms and hidden weapon systems powered up throughout the solar system. It had been 3 weeks since Admiral Kreshetal's Imperial battle group had entered human space, systematically destroying the outer colonies and pushing steadily toward humanity's home system. The human fleet had fought a series of delaying actions, trading space for time while civilian populations were evacuated and final defensive preparations were completed. Now the Imperial fleet was only hours away from Earth, and Admiral Chen was about to discover whether 5 years of preparation would be enough to save her species. Final fleet count. Admiral, reported Captain Martinez, Chen's chief of staff. We have 437 combat-ready vessels in the system, plus 200 automated defense platforms and the orbital fortresses around Earth and Mars. Chen nodded, though she knew the numbers by heart. It was still fewer ships than she had hoped for. Too many had been lost in the fighting around the outer colonies, and some of the newer vessels hadn't been completed in time for the battle. But it would have to be enough. What's our intelligence on the Imperial force? She asked. Long-range sensors confirmed 200 Imperial ships, including 5 of their largest dreadnoughts. They're approaching from the direction of Jupiter, probably planning to use the planet's gravity to mask their final approach vector. Chen walked over to the tactical display that showed the entire solar system. Red dots marked the approaching Imperial fleet, while blue symbols showed human forces. She had spent months planning for this moment, running simulations and war games, trying to find a strategy that would give humanity a chance against superior numbers and more advanced technology. The plan she had finally settled on was desperate, dangerous, and would require perfect timing from every ship in the human fleet. If it worked, the Empire would suffer a defeat that would echo across the galaxy. If it failed, humanity would be extinct within days. All ship commanders, this is Admiral Chen, she announced over the fleet communication system. The Imperial fleet will reach Earth orbit in approximately 4 hours. You all know the plan and you all know what's at stake. Today we fight not just for our own lives, but for the future of every species that refuses to bow to Imperial domination. She paused, looking out at the assembled human fleet. Each ship represented years of secret construction, months of training, and the hopes of billions of people throughout human space. They were about to face the finest military force in the known galaxy, and their only advantages were determination, preparation, and the element of surprise. Remember, she continued, the Empire expects us to fight like every other species they've conquered. They expect us to mass our ships in traditional formations and engage them in conventional space combat. We're going to do something they've never seen before. Throughout the solar system, human ships began moving to their assigned positions. Unlike traditional naval formations, they were spreading out across vast distances, some hiding behind asteroids, others using the gravity wells of planets and moons to mask their approach vectors. To an outside observer, it would look like the human fleet was scattering in panic, rather than preparing for battle. Admiral Kreshetal, commanding the approaching Imperial force from his flagship Galactic Supremacy, was indeed puzzled by what his sensors were showing him. He stood on his bridge, studying tactical displays that showed human ships moving in seemingly random directions throughout the solar system. What are they doing? Asked his second-in-command, Commander Veltar. This looks nothing like standard defensive formations. Perhaps they're retreating, Kreshetal replied, though something about the human movements bothered him. After the surprising defeat of Admiral Thex's expedition, he had expected the humans to put up organized resistance. This apparent chaos didn't match the tactical sophistication they had demonstrated in previous engagements. Sir, we're detecting massive energy signatures from the third planet, Earth, reported the sensor officer. It appears to be coming from orbital installations around the planet. Kreshetal studied the sensor readings. The energy signatures were unlike anything in Imperial databases, not the clean, efficient patterns of plasma generators or particle beam arrays, but something rougher and more primitive. Yet the power levels were enormous, far exceeding what should have been possible with human technology. "Maintain course and speed," he ordered. "All ships prepare for combat. Whatever the humans are planning, we'll be ready for it." But even as he gave the order, Crescital felt the same nagging doubt that had troubled Grand Admiral Zexthal. The humans had already surprised the Empire once with their unconventional tactics and weapons. What other surprises might they have prepared? He was about to find out. The Imperial fleet reached the outer edge of Earth's solar system and began its final approach toward the human homeworld. As they moved inward, passing the orbit of Mars, they encountered the first human resistance. It wasn't what Crescital had expected. Instead of massed formations of human warships, the Imperial fleet found itself facing individual ships and small groups that attacked from unexpected angles, fired their kinetic weapons, and then retreated before the Imperial vessels could respond effectively. It was like fighting a swarm of angry insects rather than an organized military force. "Damage reports," Crescital ordered after the third such attack had struck his fleet. "Minor hull damage to 6 vessels, sir. 1 cruiser has lost its forward shield generators. No ships destroyed, but these hit-and-run attacks are slowing our advance." The human tactics were annoying rather than decisive, but they were achieving their apparent purpose of delaying the Imperial advance while inflicting small amounts of damage. More importantly, they were forcing the Imperial fleet to maintain combat formations and keep their shields raised, which consumed additional power and reduced their maximum speed. As the Imperial fleet approached Earth's orbit, the hit-and-run attack suddenly stopped. Instead, the remaining human ships began gathering near Earth itself, finally forming something that looked like conventional battle lines. Crescital felt a sense of relief. This was the kind of fighting he understood. "All ships prepare for main engagement," he ordered. "Target their command vessels first, then work your way through their battle line." This ends now. The Imperial fleet accelerated toward Earth, their plasma cannons charging and their shields at maximum power. It was an impressive sight. 200 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy, moving in perfect formation toward an enemy that was outnumbered almost 2-1. That's when Admiral Chen sprung her trap. The energy signatures that Imperial sensors had detected around Earth suddenly resolved into their true purpose. Hidden throughout the asteroid belt, on the dark sides of moons, and in the depths of space between planets, thousands of kinetic weapon platforms had been lying dormant. As the Imperial fleet committed to their attack on Earth, these hidden weapons came online simultaneously. The first barrage caught the Imperial fleet completely by surprise. Kinetic projectiles fired from positions throughout the solar system converged on the Imperial formation from every direction. There was no warning, no energy buildup that sensors could detect, just solid metal rounds moving at significant fractions of light speed. The Imperial ships, focused on the human fleet near Earth, were caught in a crossfire that their defensive systems couldn't handle. Their shields, designed to deflect energy weapons coming from in front of them, were suddenly being hit by kinetic rounds from above, below, and from both sides. "Evasive maneuvers," Crescital shouted as his flagship rocked under multiple impacts. "All ships, scatter formation!" But it was too late. The human kinetic bombardment had been timed to catch the Imperial fleet at the moment when they were most committed to their attack vector and least able to maneuver. Ship after ship in the Imperial formation was torn apart by the coordinated barrage. Then the human fleet near Earth did something that completed Crescital's confusion and terror. Instead of staying in their defensive positions, they suddenly accelerated directly toward the Imperial fleet at maximum speed, their own kinetic weapons firing continuously. It wasn't a defensive battle at all. It was an ambush on a scale that the Empire had never experienced. The human ships, built for close combat with their heavy armor and devastating short-range weapons, closed with the Imperial fleet and began tearing it apart from the inside. Imperial vessels, designed for long-range energy weapon duels, found themselves in brutal close-quarters combat against enemies that seemed to absorb their fire while delivering devastating return volleys. The battle turned into a massacre. Imperial ships that survived the initial kinetic bombardment found themselves surrounded by human vessels that rammed them, boarded them, and destroyed them with methods that ignored every convention of civilized warfare. human Marines wearing powered armor and carrying weapons that could penetrate Imperial hull plating, forced their way aboard Imperial ships and captured them from within.